So thank you all for joining us today on this webinar. My name is Vivek Pandit, as part of the industry e-invoicing team based in Montreal, the IATA team based in Montreal. And today I am joined by a few of my colleagues. We will present my colleagues in just a bit as we begin today's presentation. So with no further ado, let's kick off. Thank you all for joining us. Just as a couple legal reminders, as always, that we do have on our webinars. Participants are reminded that live streaming of this webinar by participants to other parties that are not in attendance is not permitted, except as indicated by and with the express permission and knowledge of IATA. Unauthorized recording of the meeting is also prohibited. And lastly, IATA will record the webinar and share the link afterwards to all members of this group, and it will also be posted on the CIS website. For this webinar, we do need to cover a few extra competition law guidelines for participants on the call. Today, we just wish to remind everyone on today's call, as it is related to passenger rejections and interline. These elements are not for discussion today, which would be any element of price, including fares or service charges, commissions of any kind, allocations of customers or markets, marketing plans, commercial terms, and or any strategic decision making, any other strategic decisions, group boycotts, your relations with agents, airlines, system providers, or other third parties, and lastly, any other issues aimed at influencing the independent business decisions of competitors. So please be reminded of these competition law guidelines as we host today's webinar. And now I'd like to introduce to everyone our presenters for today's webinar. Today we have Gavin Pereira, the Quality and Data Maintenance Analyst at Air New Zealand, Sachin Jain, the Manager, Revenue Audit, Interline and Refund and Financial Reporting at Etihad Airways, and lastly, Kirk Pereira, the Head of Standardization Invoicing, e-invoicing with IATA based in Madrid. And before we begin, let's take a look at the agenda items we will cover today. As highlighted on the invitation, we will expand on these topics today in our session. We will cover 2020 highlights of IATA Passenger Rejection Memo Reduction Initiative, some industry statistics regarding passenger interline rejections, and then we'll dive into passenger interline best practices in terms of data quality controls checklists, and then what are some of the benefits we will highlight or mention of these of ensuring high quality prime billings and reducing rejections. Lastly, at any time throughout the session, we do encourage you all to post your questions. There is a questions box on the tool. Please feel free to post your questions at any time throughout the session. We will do our best to get your questions answered at the end of the session. And also, they will be emailed to everyone as part of the post-completion webinar package to everyone on the call. And with that, I will hand off to my colleague, Kirk, who will take us through the first part of today's session. Kirk?
Thank you, Vivek. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all those who have joined the webinar. My name is Kirk Pereira. I'm the head standardization e-invoicing for IATA, and I've been with IATA for the last 10 years, first in Montreal with the CIS team, and now with my new role in Madrid. I have around 22 years in this industry. Today, I will be first giving you an update on the rejection reduction initiative, and then later on move on to the passenger interline billing statistics that are always relevant, but have become even more so with COVID. So to start off let's start with some background of this initiative. In 2015, the Passenger Rejection Memo Reduction Initiative was endorsed by the IATA Financial Committee. Now they are known as FINAC, and they mandated the Interline Billing and Settlement Operations Working Group, that's the IBS Ops, to reduce the number of unnecessary passenger rejection memos in the industry. The IBS Ops Working Group, along with the CIS team, worked and came up with a target for the entire industry to reduce the the rejection rate by 32% over 5 years. So by the end of 2020, that is by December 2020, we wanted to achieve a reduction of 32% from the 2015 standards. So we continued to work with the IBS Ops working group, and later on we also had the IBS Ops working group create a smaller subgroup within the IBS Ops of 7 airlines to work along with us on this initiative. We would like to thank the airlines from the subgroup mentioned here, along with the other IBS Ops working group members, as well as the CIS steering group members who have always supported us and continue to support us to reducing rejections across the industry. As you're aware, with COVID, we had a major impact on air travel, and hence the target of 32% was put on hold in April 2020 due to the impact on volumes. Because if you don't have anyone flying, there was no way we could actually continue monitoring the reduction in rejections. So it was put on hold because by Feb 2020, we as an industry had achieved a reduction of 30.03% compared to 2015. And if volumes were stable and continued the way they were, we would have achieved the target in a couple of months. With the approval of FINAC, IBS Ops deemed that the target was set as achieved. However, IBS Ops wanted IATA to continue monitoring these volumes and to ensure that best practices and all the changes which we put in place are met, and we do not actually lose some of the gains which we had got over this last 5 years. Well, how did we reduce our rejection volumes from 2015? Well, the first thing that we wanted to do was not to ask airlines to stop raising rejections, but we wanted to try and get the airlines to bill correctly from the beginning. So we incorporated some new validations and changes to CIS. So we wanted to improve the data quality between the billing and the billed airlines, as well as introducing reports which help them to monitor the billing and billed volumes. The IBS Ops also worked pretty hard on clarifying items in the revenue accounting manual, as well as putting in some changes to ensure that there were no loopholes or things which were not clear. Another thing which we realized was awareness. We found that just by making people aware of these issues helped in reducing rejections, as well as timely communications also really helped in getting the numbers down. And one of the things which came out from the subgroup which we worked with was a best practices document, which has been published for the last 2 years on the CIS website, and it is intended to guide airlines as well as make everyone aware of the different reports which you can use to actually monitor your interline and prime billings. Some of the items will be covered by my co-presenters later on in the webinar today. So one of the items we had to do in April 2020 was also modify the way we used to calculate the rejection reduction progress. We modified it to consider a time lag between the prime billing and the rejections, mainly because we had to take into account the decline of prime billing volumes due to COVID-19. We studied the trend of rejections, and what we found was that around 85% of rejections happen within 3 months of the prime billing. So we introduced a time lag, so this could actually give us a much clearer picture. And what we also had to do was we had to recalculate all the way back to 2015. So with the current monitoring, the new value which we have is around 25%, which is still a big success to actually have reduced over the past 5 years. And while we don't have a target set for now, we continue to monitor, and if we observe any sort of abnormalities, we raise this to the IBS Ops, as well as sometimes we contact airlines about it. Moving to some statistics on 2020 volumes, and all these volumes, again, just to mention, these are all taken from CIS, because all the interline billings are are being sent through SIS. So it helps us to have a common place where we can actually track and identify cases which are not being done correctly. So this slide shows the trend of prime billings throughout the last 5 years. It's a bit of a crowded slide, but just so that we are aligned on terminology. Prime billings, when I mention it, would be flight coupons, it could be exchanges, refunds, EMDs, excess baggage, etc. just billed between interline partners. So these are all your first billings. And the pink line here, if you see, is 2019. That was the highest we had. We were actually increasing year on year. We had quite the highest volumes. And then actually in 2020, the Jan and Feb, we actually had a really the highest volumes ever before COVID struck. And then we had a decrease first of 39% to in the month of March, and then right up in the month of April, 89%, where the volumes have dipped and continues that way for the rest of the year. The table below now just gives you the counts of interline transactions. And again, these are only prime billing counts year on year. So you can see from 2015, where we had nearly 125 million, to 2019, where we have 160 million. There was a continuous increase until 2020, where we ended up with just nearly 46 million. So a big drop of around 63% when you compare 2015 to 2020, and an even bigger drop of 71% if you just compare 2020 versus 2019. In terms of rejections, if in the previous slide you would have seen that we had prime billings increase by nearly 36 million went from 2015 to 2019, but in rejections we have managed to keep the count stable. So it was always around 12 million, and 2019 we have got it down to around 11 million. So despite the increase in transaction in prime billing, rejections did not increase the same way. In fact, there has been a dip. 2020, unfortunately, we see rejections drop to 5.7 million. If it was a normal year, this would have been really good, because we would have seen a 50% drop in rejections. We would feel very happy about it. But we all know the drop is not because of really good billings, but it's just that prime billings drop. So naturally, you also have the rejections which have dropped. This next chart is the amount, is the value of the rejections. So on a year on year, you can see that the value has dropped from 2015, when you had the amount in dispute, to around $1.7 billion, to 2019, when we have dropped to around just a little bit over $1 billion, and 2020, where it's around $655 million, the amount in disputes over rejections. If you just divide this amount, so you take the amount and you just divide by the number of transactions, you get an average. So the average in 2015 was around $140 per rejection. 2019, it had come down right to $93 on an average, so a big drop from 140 to 93. Unfortunately, in 2020, it has gone up a little bit more. From 93, it's moved back to 114. So a little bit more of in terms of value being rejected. So splitting the analysis of rejections, as all of you interline experts are aware, there are 3 stages of rejections. So this slide is showing the analysis of the first stage, highlighting the percentage of first stage rejections against the total prime billings. So this formula takes into a full year. So you can say in December 2020, we can say that for every 100 prime billings, we have around 4 0.32 rejections. Okay, and that's that's a decrease. So if you see that December 2018 we had 5.38, December 29 4.77, December 2020 it's down to 4.32. So every year on year we as an industry are improving our billings. There are lesser rejections, and it's good that way, and we have to continue keeping it to the minimum. If we move to stage 2, and stage 2 a little bit less than a percent between the 3 years, but same way it's still a bit higher. You remember the previous slide where only around 4 per 100 billings you have 4 rejections. Here per 100 first stage RMs, another 31 get rejected. So definitely work to be done over here. And moving to a stage 3, this is where we look at stage 2 RMs raised and how many get re-rejected back at stage 3. A bit of reduction here too, but the number is still too high. So for every 100 stage 2 RMs, 41 get rejected back at stage 3. This has been one of the places where we have been working with IBS Ops. We understand this causes a lot of work to review. It's many a times it is a manual review, and this increases the cost. So while there has been some improvement from 45% in 2018 to maybe 41% now, it's still high, and definitely a lot of work can be done to improve stage 2 and stage 3 rejections. So if we drill down a bit, and these are the reasons for rejections, and again we are taking the numbers from CIS. So you would see the first stage rejections. You have the CIS codes here: 1G, 1T, 1Y. So 1G is tax overbilled, 1T is involuntary rerouted tax difference, and 1Y is YQYR tax billings. And same with fare related, where you have 1B is fare overbilled, 1S is SPA applied, 1Z is involuntary rerouting fare differences, and 2S would be SPA not applicable. So looking at this, we see that we have around 38% for tax related, 38% for fare related, around the same. And if you look at 2019, there has been a decrease. So compared to 2019, taxes were much more higher being rejected, and now in 2020 they are almost equal. Moving to stage 2, and in stage 2 we see a slight shift which happens. So in stage 2 we have fare which is 45%. So fare has moved up and taxes dropped to 33%. So some part of incorrectly billed taxes are getting sought out in the first stage rejections. So they get handled. So maybe they are billed incorrectly, then they are accepted, and that's fine. But fare continues to be on the higher side, and it goes up a bit. Plus we have some others like 5Z, which is 102, ISC 53,000, which are quite a lot to be actually going into a stage 2, where probably these are some things we need to actually try and fix, because they should not be so many going into stage 2 or stage 3. And in the third stage analysis, what we can see is tax has now moved to 53%. Okay, so tax is 53%, whereas fare has moved to 53%, whereas tax has dropped to 27%. So this is again a worry, as fare disputes, they keep on moving to correspondence, which further increases the workload. It is important that we solve interpretation issues. So these could be interpretations due to a bilateral agreement, or it could be some sort of dispute with another airline. But it's easier if you can solve it in your first or second stage rejections, rather than letting all of them go into the third stage or even into correspondence, because that is going to increase your workload over there. Also, a thing is there is not much difference between your 2019 and 2020 third stage volumes. So even while we have seen prime billing volumes go down, first stage and second stage rejections go down, third stage volumes are pretty much near to each other. So we see a lot of disputes still happening in the industry. So the last few slides I've been talking a bit about the counts of rejections and the split between fair and tax. Now, if we look at the values and the values in dispute, if you remember the earlier slides, we have 2020, we have around 655 million in dispute. Where is the breakup? And what we see is between 85 to 90%, the breakup of the value is on fair, whereas 10 to 15% it is on tax. So definitely higher values in the places of fair compared to tax. A short look at source code 31, and for those who don't know what source code 31 was, this was a new source code which was introduced a couple of years before. This is an optional source code which you can use for involuntary reroute coupons. This was one of the changes we had put forward, and it allowed us better visibility on involuntary rerouting billings and their subsequent rejections. So over here, you have the prime billings for involuntary billings from Jan to Feb, Jan 2020 to Feb 2021. And of course, there has been a decrease from April onwards because of lower volumes. But the interesting thing what we can do over here is that since it's under a separate source code, we can also track any rejections for them. So what we have is the rejections raised against these coupons. Now from December onwards, the time limits are not up, and these could further be changed. We could get more rejections coming in. But the interesting part here is looking at the rejection percentage. Now, if you remember on the first slide, on one of the starting slides, we talked about first stage rejections and how for every 100 coupons, we have around 4.32 getting rejected. The interesting thing over here is when you have a source code 31 involuntary, on an average, we have around 25% getting rejected. So a lot more rejections happening for involuntary rerouting. And that's one of the things which we are working along with IBS Ops is on how can we simplify the billing procedures for involuntary reroutings to get these rejections actually down. So finally, just a quick view on 2021. We have the prime billings and the rejections, so not really much improvement in terms of volumes. Jan and Feb was 2.4 million and 1.7 million respectively, compared to the highs of 13 million. So we hope that we can actually pick up the prime billings this year, and rejections are still following the normal trend which we have seen in the last 3 months. So nothing much yet to analyze or to go through over there. However, we also monitor how the industry has been processing transactions during COVID, and just a couple of slides on that. So this slide shows a quick it just shows how quick an airline builds out flight coupons which are uplifted. So what the team does over here is they take the coupons built out in a particular month, and we show how much of those coupons are from the same billing month by looking at the flight date. So for example, if you take Jan 2020, so in the billing month of Jan, we can see 93.29% had flight coupons with Jan flown date. So they are flown in the same month and billed in the same month. We have 5.84, which is actually of the previous previous month, that is December, and we have 0.52 which is of November, which was included, and so on and so forth. So this shows how good or how quick we bill out. We see a drop in April, so we see the effects. What has happened in many places, COVID started taking effect end of Feb and March, and we see a lot of March coupons, which are nearly 35%, were billed actually in April, and so on. So the good part is from June onwards, the trend started coming back. So people could recover. They could start doing the billings on time, and going forward till Jan 21, most of the prime coupons are being billed again in the month they are being uplifted. So it's been good. When we look at rejections, again we read the slide as the billing month. So the billing month is the month the rejections have been raised, and the rejected transaction months are the months of the previous transaction. So the previous transaction could either be a prime transaction or it could be a previous rejection stage. So for example, if we take Jan, we see that 7.41 are transactions billed in Jan and rejected in Jan. So it could be someone billing you in P1 of Jan and you're rejecting them by P4 of Jan. 27.15 is for the previous month. So let's say December 2019. 32.59 is November 2019, and so on and so forth. So when the pandemic started, we started seeing a shift. So if you actually look at May, you see that there more of a shift happening over here, where when the Jan to March transactions which were received are being rejected a bit later. So it was moving over here. Then from June and July, we see that it gets actually worse, wherein transactions move to the third and fourth month. In fact, if you look at July, you see 44% of those rejections were actually related to March transactions. So transactions billed in March, but and you're in the last month of time limits, so you're rejecting it in July. And then we slowly start seeing some sort of recovery happening in August, September, October, where probably people are now used to working from home. There are things backup plans put in place, and we are recovering. However, the good part to see is we start improving from November, and actually now we are processing even better than we were processing previously. So a lot of rejections or audit is happening in the very next month of receiving it. Of course, volumes have dropped, but it's good to see that airlines are auditing the invoices faster and to quicken the cash flow. So these processing stats are part of the monthly COVID bulletin, and it's issued by the SysTeam. If you have not been receiving this and are interested, then you can contact the Sys operations team via the IATA customer portal, and what they can do is add you to the mailing list. So that was it for me. I will now pass this on to Sachin Jain from the IBS Ops Working Group, and he's going to take you on the next part about interline best practices. Over to you, Sachin.
Thanks, Kirk. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Sachin Jain. I'm Manager Financial Reporting and Interline Settlement in Etihad Airways, working with Etihad Airways from last 30 years. I will be talking about some of the best practices, which is paramount important for interline billing and settlement process. So when we talk about the interline settlement process, the first things comes into our mind is master data management. Yes. So master data management is the backbone of revenue accounting system. Any inconsistency in master data management could lead to inaccurate billings, increase in rejections, and possible revenue leakage. Therefore, Everyone needs to make sure that your master data is up to date and they are reviewed timely and updated accurately. So there are two types of master data, which we call it as industry master data and airline master data. Industry master data consists of your prorate factor, base amounts, provisos, FDR, MMR, TTBS, RATD, etc. These are available electronically. Most of them are available in electronic formats. Only exception to the proviso where you have to do the manual coding into a system. We encourage that these master data are loaded into your test environments and tested before it moves you into a production environment. Similarly, you have your airline master data, which is related to your bilateral agreements, SPA code share, your code share mapping, your YQI agreements, ID agreements, Z agreements, UATP, and so on and so forth. We encourage again these agreements and these data are coded into your test environments. They have been tested, they have been reviewed and signed off before it moves to enter a production environment. Chart 2 filings are more related to commercial pricing and fair filing, but this could increase, have the any inaccuracy in filing those from the commercial side could lead to rejections and billing disputes. So it is always advisable to monitor those filings along with your commercial team. Some of the best practice which we as Etihad Airways follows within our airline, and we recommend and encourage everyone to follow. Get the SPA interpreted from your commercial team and validate those information through the SPA checklist, which we have already recommended in IATA recommended practice in RAM chapter week 14. Get those clarified, any ambiguous clauses, any clauses which has not been clarified correctly in the SPAs. Get your SPA validated before the signing. We review the SPAs, code those SPA into a test environment, get the test cases validated, and then move into a production. This will certainly improve your reductions on your fare billings and tax billings, especially related to your YQIR. Moving into the billing analysis, as we are in the automated world and we expect majority of our works to be done by assistants. Although it happens, but without doing the proper evaluation, sometimes you tend to lose or underbill or overbill based on the system evaluation. So you always needs to review, and you need to have your manual quality controls checks in place to make sure that your billing is accurate and it's not being overbilled and underbilled. Some of the quality checks reviews which we recommend is do the comparison between the SPA and NPA cases, where then you have the bilateral SPA with the carrier and you compare that why the SPA is not getting applied in majority of recruitments. That comparison will give you a big indication that if your system is doing any incorrect evaluation. Code share and non-code share review, if any of the code share master is not been updated correctly into your system, this comparison and this quality checks will give you the benefits if any incorrect master update has been done in your system. Similarly, value checks, do your high value, low value checks, and do your YQIR and Q surcharge billing evaluation. These controls can be done based on the collected versus interlineable quality check reports, build up reports which can detect your duplicate billings. As we can see from the previous slides, there are a big number of duplicate billings are still happening in electronic environment as well. Do your rejection analysis. There are a number of reports available in SIS portal, which can give you the trend analysis and airline breakdowns on reason code wise, which can help you to track which carrier is doing rejection and why. Do your correspondence aging analysis. Again, there is a reports available in your SIS portal, which can give you the aged item, and you have the auto. You have the ability to set the auto alerts for number of correspondence which is going beyond certain limits. You get the auto alerts in monthly formats. And finally, you always have the option of doing your process check by way of doing the second pass audit on interline process. This will give you the benefits and comfort that everything is working fine in your environment. If you follow these, some of the best practice, I'm sure the results will be normal and we can achieve more than what we have achieved so far. With this, I hand over to my colleague Kevin to take further on the upcoming slides. Thank you. Over to you, Gavin.
Thank you, Sachin. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. As Kirk pointed out in the SIS-RM analysis earlier, the tax and fare rejections make up approximately 75% of both first and second stage rejections. Fare rejections related to SPAs must be resolved bilaterally. We strongly advise that you escalate disputes related to SPAs to your respective commercial departments for clarification and/or resolution, rather than simply maintaining rejections and entering multiple corresponding stages. On the other hand, tax rejections, excluding YQYR, given that we have a single source of tax data, which is the RATD, points to either a solo or combination of tax master data maintenance or transaction data or revenue accounting system issues. In the following slides, we will visit some areas vulnerable to both fare and tax rejections. Involuntary reroutes and schedule changes. The definition and billing procedures for involuntary reroutes and schedule changes, as you all know, is available or can be found under RAM chapters 8 to 2.5, 2.6, and 2.7 respectively. RAM chapter 8 to 2.5 addresses involuntary reroutes. RAM chapter 8 to 2.6 addresses schedule changes, and RAM chapter 8 to 2.7 provides a flowchart for identification and billing of involuntary reroutes and schedule changes. Billing of taxes in case of involuntary reroutes can be found under RAM chapter 8 to 1.8.2.2. Please note that the new rule for billing of taxes in case of involuntary reroutes is applicable to prime billing invoicing of all reissued tickets on or after 1st April 2020. We strongly advise that you check if you have any bilaterally agreed settlements for involuntary reroutes with your interline partners and ensure that the same are coded in your revenue accounting system to ensure accurate billings. In the case of schedule changes, we also recommend that you check for existence of any reprotection agreements with your commercial departments prior to billing. Lowest applicable fare. Rules pertaining to the application of the lowest applicable fare can be found under RAM Chapter A2, Para 3. Further clarification and guidelines on this subject of the lowest applicable fare was presented by the IBS Ops Working Group at the WFS 2019 held in Miami. For the benefit of those participants who did not attend the WFS 2019, and for the sake of time, we have provided a link in this presentation to be viewed at your own pace. Taxes, fees, and charges. The RATD is a single source for billing of interlineable taxes. We strongly recommend that the tax master data in your revenue accounting system is updated on a monthly basis, given that the RATD is also issued on a monthly basis, preferably electronically using the ATPCO X1 file. All billing rules for taxes can be found under RAM chapters 8.2, 1.8.3, and 1.8.4. As mentioned earlier, billing rules for taxes in case of involuntary reroutes can be found under RAM chapters 8.2, 1.8.2.2. ATPCO and IATA have come together to create the ATPCO IATA Joint Tax Governance Group. This governance group will specifically address issues related to taxes. A subgroup has been created to review complex taxes, that is the top 10 interlineable taxes that cause the most rejections in the tax billing area. We would like to update the industry on some important information. Please remember that the deadline for acceptance of paper excess baggage tickets is 31st May 2021. Effective 1st June 2021, paper baggage tickets excess baggage tickets will not be accepted for interline billing unless bilaterally agreed. Also note that source code 25 will still be available in SIS for usage post 1st June 2021 for billing of paper excess baggage tickets. This is explicitly for use by airlines that have bilaterally agreed to accept paper excess baggage tickets on or after 1st June 2021. All clarification requests on RAM rules can be sent to the IBS Ops working group. If airlines need a binding decision for solving their disputes with their partners, they can always bring the disputes to the attention of the Committee of Difference. Procedures for the same are available in the RAM. In the RAM, the email address is also available in the RAM as well as on the next slide of this presentation. However, we would like to stress that bilateral agreements like SPAs, codeshare agreements, etc., are out of scope and should be undertaken for resolution between the respective commercial departments. Further disputes concerning the multilateral proration agreement MPA may be directed directly to the prorate agency. The Interline Best Practices Guide can be found at the link in this presentation as well. Rejection memos and correspondence reports are also available in SIS for your respective airlines. Go to SIS, reports, passenger, non-sampling RM analysis, comparison to industry. We strongly recommend that you view these reports and create action plans for improvement in rejection and correspondence areas. We also recommend that every airline check the SIS validation master for the YQYR block under their respective member profiles. Again, go to SIS, member profile, passenger, manage block for tax billing. Stay alive rejections and correspondence. A word of caution to all ICH and SIS member airlines. It has been brought to the attention of the IBS working group that some rejections and correspondences have been sent back with no valid reason. This is simply because the airline has been unable to process the same within IATA time limits due to reasons linked to the pandemic. An IATA bulletin was sent out on the 5th of May 2020 addressing this problem. Please note that this is not permitted under RAM rules, and this is being closely monitored by the IATA SIS operations team. Any extension of time limits must be bilaterally agreed between the two interline partners. Finally, we would like to remind our member airlines of the upcoming IBS Ops and SIS general meetings. In lieu of the same, we request member airlines to send the agenda items proposals to wfsim@iata.org prior to the 18th of May 2021. Please note that each agenda item proposal must include a brief background, a problem statement, and a proposed solution. With this, we conclude our presentation and we'll move on to the Q&A session. Vivek, over to you.
Thank you, Gavin. Thank you, Gavin, Sachin, and Kirk. So that brings us to the end of the content for today's presentation. As we wrap up, we just want to, before we take questions and wrap up, we just want to remind everyone this presentation, it will be shared on the SIS website as well as to your emails, but it will be available on the SIS website going forward for you to access any of the links and documents that you've seen embedded in the presentation today. And as we wrap up, I just want to remind everyone of the rejections page of the SIS website. So for those of you who are not familiar, we do maintain the latest statistics and any important reports regarding the rejection reduction initiative on the IATA SIS website. If you go to www.iata.org/SIS, SIS for airlines, and then the rejections tab will provide you with the latest information and the content available. And now we will take any questions that we have received from the floor. Now I will take a look at what we have. And we do have a few questions that I have a few minutes just to cover, just a few of them. The first one we can ask is for Kirk, this may be for. Is there any rejection reduction target that has been set for 2021?
So currently we have not set any target, as we are waiting for volumes to recover. Once we are approximately at around say 50% of 2019 prime billing volumes, then we will jointly review this with IBS Ops and set a target for the next 3 years. Till that point, the SIS operations team, they continue monitoring of the rejection volumes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Kirk. And we have a couple more we can cover. There's one maybe Sachin can help with. Sachin, we have a question. I think it was also maybe covered in Gavin's portion. Is there any clear guidelines in the RAM to identify the involuntary and planned schedule changes?
Yes, we do have the clear guideline in RAM chapter A2 para 2.7, which clearly gives the flowchart how to identify the involuntary and planned schedule change in accordance to the resolution 735D.
Okay, perfect. RAM chapter A2 paragraph 2.7. Thank you. We have a few more. Kirk, maybe you can take this one. Is there any report that can be used to monitor passenger correspondence?
So yes, correspondence is an issue and it has been going up, but there are some reports which are there in SIS which can be used for monitoring. So it also depends whether you're a day-to-day user. So if you're someone who's using correspondence every day, we have receivables and payables correspondence report, which you can download. And we also, for managers, we have a correspondence aging report. So that was one of the items which came out from the subgroup which of airlines who said that we should have a report which ideally goes to the managers, and this can be set up in SIS. So what you get in that report is you get a list of correspondences which have been initiated and which you have got authority, but you have not raised billing memos for it. You also get a list of correspondences that have expired due to non-reply from the other airline, and you have not yet raised the billing memo. You get open correspondences that have crossed the 7th stage. And the 7th stage is, why is it 7th stage? It's something we agreed with the IBS Ops working group that, you know, a correspondence which has gone after 7 stages, maybe it's time that someone senior in the airline or maybe the manager has a look at it. So you as a manager can see the number of correspondences which have gone across the 7th stage and the value. And this you have for both, for the ones you initiated and for the ones which the other airline has initiated against you. So yeah, if you need any help, you can contact the SysOps team, and they will help you to set this up too.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Kirk, regarding correspondences and aging and actions. Sachin, we have one that you may be able to answer, whether the new rule of billing for involuntary taxes that became effective in April 2020 is based on the travel date or is based on the ticket issue date. If you can please clarify this for us.
Yep, sure. The new rule which has been introduced in RAM 2020 is based on the revised routing, is based on the ticket reissue date, which is on or after 1st of April 2020.
Perfect. Thank you. So it's on issue date. And then one more, maybe you can address first. Lastly, we have this last question. What shall I do if a member receives a stay alive rejection?
If any of the member receive such rejection which has no valid reason and simply because of airlines are rejecting because they are unable to process within the time limit, the carrier always have the option to re-reject those for such rejections. And also you can bring this to a notice of IATA on these such kind of unnecessary rejection which has no valid reason. And you may also include the rejection related bulletins which IATA has been presented.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind, just one more, I think this one is important for everyone. Regarding disputes related with fares, what additional suggestions can we provide to give as they receive quite a lot of fare related rejections?
Great. As Gavin has explained in the previous slides, so in Miami, there was an exclusive session which IBS working group has given it to the industry, explaining how to find your lowest applicable fare. The lowest applicable fare guidelines is available, and it's part of our today's presentation also. We encourage people, member airline, to go through that presentation and we encourage and suggest to discuss any fare related disputes with their pricing experts within their airlines.
Perfect. Thank you, Sachin. Thank you as well, Kirk. And I believe that would bring us to the number of time we have allotted for questions. Unfortunately, we do have more questions, but we may not be able to get to all of them. However, as a reminder, we will share the responses to your questions asked on the webinar today. We have received them. We will draft the responses and share them with you on email, as well as post them on the website, together with this recording of the webinar and the actual slides presentations in PDF format, so you can access the links that were mentioned today. So with that, we will close today's webinar. Thank you all once again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on future SIS webinars. Please stay safe and take care wherever you may be. Thank you and goodbye.